The New U.S. Republic via a Global Currency Reset. By Steve Beckow. April 10, 2016. goldenagevgaya.com. Short of Nancy Detweiler's account, I haven't seen such a full discussion of Nizara. In addition, unlike any account I've seen so far, this account supplies the names of some of the white hats and military units that fought the cabal to a standstill. It tells details that I haven't seen elsewhere. I'm going to leave it up for another day or two to make sure everyone has a chance to read it. What follows is a remarkable history of recent times regarding the global currency reset, the new American Republic, etc. No author is cited. It contains statements which, the first time they were made, caused a firestorm, such as that House Speaker Paul Ryan was the new interim president and that President Obama is part of the New World Order. Jayog does not believe the latter allegation. It may shock some people, for instance, by asserting that cabal monies are laundered through the Vatican Bank. That's likely to be distressing to the Catholic faithful. Reader discretion is advised. Federal Reserve to new U.S. Republic via a global currency reset. The global currency reset is a complicated process about a global reset of currencies, removal of the Hazarian Mafia and restoration of the U.S. Republic and the original U.S. Constitution. At present the process is playing out with no holds and is expected to be completed within days. Below is a history of that process, including forming of the U.S. New Republic, integration of the Federal Reserve into the new U.S. Treasury in Reno, expected changes in the U.S. tax system, expected release of the 800 numbers and relationship of humanitarian projects to $800 trillion in U.S. taxpayer monies gained from a 1992 audit of the Federal Reserve. The higher contract rates are available, especially if you are dedicating a good percentage of your monies to humanitarian projects. Those higher rates are said to be funded out of $800 trillion in U.S. taxpayer monies that were illegally taken by the Federal Reserve during the Bush administration, then confiscated during the 1992 Federal Reserve audit. At present the monies are in European bank accounts awaiting the GCR. History of the New Republic and Global Currency Reset Process. 1. Please refer to a short trailer of the to-be-released documentary Eagle One to Wanta. The major film documentary covers how President Reagan's secret agent Ambassador Lee-Emil Wanta amassed $3.8 trillion through a negotiated agreement with Soviet Secretary General Mikhail Gorbachev during the fall of the Soviet Union. The $3.8 trillion was designed to go back to the American people but was stolen by the Federal Reserve System. Wanta has pledged to eliminate our national debt overnight after a 2006 U.S. District Court mandate is honored that would return the money. The documentary is scheduled to be released upon announcement of the new republic around July 4, 2016. 2. Since its inception, the U.S. monetary system has been owned and run by a cabal known as the Hazarian Mafia, North American Union and U.S. Incorporated, Corporation of the United States, which is simply a privately owned maritime corporation out of Puerto Rico. 3. The U.S. Federal Reserve is not connected to the U.S. government. The cabal owners are membered by influential world powers like the Vatican, European royalty, and private families such as George Soros, Rothschilds, Carnegies and Rockefellers. Cabal monies are commonly laundered through the Vatican Bank. 4. The current version of the privately owned Federal Reserve System started around 450 years ago at the creation of the Vatican Trust by ancient royal families. One of the major royal funding streams reached its term and was cut off at the start of December 2015, opening the door for closure of the Federal Reserve and implementation of the new U.S. Treasury. 5. The Federal Reserve Bank is composed of a group of private central banks whose main interest is serving the cabal. 6. The global currency reset has become part of the takedown of this illegal U.S. corporate government through formation of the U.S. New Republic, new U.S. Treasury and new U.S. currency notes backed by natural resources and gold of the royal dragon families. The dragon families are based in the Philippines and are not connected to, nor claim to be influenced by, the Chinese government. 7. U.S. Federal Reserve notes are backed by gold, borrowed from the royal dragon families after World War II, but only used for government and trade purposes. This monetary system functions under the non-US government-owned North American Union. 8. The Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, that are used by U.S. citizens have no backing at all and are referred to as fiat currency. 9. The United States is the only country on the planet that does not have its own national currency. One of the purposes of the global currency reset is for the U.S. to secure its own asset-backed currency. 10. For years the cabal has fought implementation of the GCR since it takes away a lot of their power and monetary gain, including closure of their privately owned Federal Reserve. 11. Since inception of the U.S., citizens have been forced to buy their Federal Reserve note currency, along with paying interest on it, from the privately owned Federal Reserve. 12. The U.S. Internal Revenue Service came on shore as a Delaware corporation back in 1934 and was immediately purchased by an attorney firm, which then incorporated the Delaware Corporation. 13. Eventually the IRS ended up in a holding company known as the Northern Trust Company, which also owns the state and U.S. bar associations. For all intents and purposes the IRS and U.S. Bar Association are essentially the same entity. 14. The Federal Reserve note had interest attached to it which helped to create our nation's well over $17 trillion national debt. Some say we are actually over 100 trillion in debt. 15. The Dragon families excused that debt when their gold was placed in the new U.S. Treasury in Reno last week. This included excusing debt and derivatives of the Wells Fargo Bank, which is owned by the Dragon families, plus the derivatives of certain other banks. There is a question about excusing debt and derivatives of Bank of America since it is heavily used by the cabal. 16. In 1991 Roy Schwasinger went before a Senate committee to present evidence of the international bankers and government criminal activity through the Federal Reserve. He informed them how the corporation of the United States was tied to the establishment of a new world order, which intended to bring about a fascist one-world government ruled by the international bankers. 17. In 1992 a task force was put together consisting of over 300 retired and 35 active U.S. military officers who strongly supported constitutional law. This task force was responsible for investigating governmental officials, congressional officers, judges, and the Federal Reserve. 18. The task force included Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Jeremy Borda, General David McLeod and former Director of Central Intelligence, William Colby. They uncovered the common practice of bribery and extortion committed by both senators and judges. The criminal activity was so rampant that only 2 out of 535 members of Congress were deemed honest. More importantly, they ordered and carried out the first ever, and only, audit of the Federal Reserve. 19. The Federal Reserve was accustomed to giving orders to politicians and had no intentions of being audited. However, after they were informed their offices would be raided under military gunpoint if necessary, they complied with the investigation. After reviewing their files, the military officers found $800 trillion sitting in accounts which should have been applied to the national debt. Contrary to federal government propaganda, they also discovered that most nations owed money to the United States instead of the other way around. 20. These hidden trillions were then confiscated and placed into European bank accounts in order to generate the enormous funds needed to pay a successful farmers' claims class action lawsuit that helped to instigate the 1992 Federal Reserve audit. Later this money would become the basis of the GCR prosperity programs fulfilling humanitarian needs across the planet. 21. Despite these death blows, President George H.W. Bush and the Illuminati continued on with their plans for global enslavement. In August 1992, the military officers confronted President Bush and demanded he sign an agreement that he would return the United States to constitutional law and ordered him to never use the term New World Order again. 22. Bush pretended to cooperate, but secretly planned to bring about the New World Order anyway. He set out to sign an executive order on December 25, 1992 that would have indefinitely closed all banks, giving Bush an excuse to declare martial law. Under the chaos of martial law, Bush intended to install a new constitution which would have kept everyone currently in office in their same position for 25 years, plus it would have removed all rights to elect new officials. The military intervened and stopped Bush from signing that executive order. 23. In 1993, members of the Supreme Court, certain members of Congress and representatives from the Clinton government met with high-ranking U.S. military officers who were demanding a return to constitutional law, reforms of the banking system and financial redress. Clinton, however, was a proponent of the New World Order and as a result, nothing of substance was done. 24. NESARA National Economic Security and Reformation Act is the most groundbreaking reformation to sweep the U.S. The act does away with the Federal Reserve Bank, the IRS, and the shadow government, and implements the following changes. A. Zeroes out all credit card, mortgage, and other bank debt due to illegal banking and government activities. This is the Federal Reserve's worst nightmare, a jubilee or a forgiveness of debt. B. Abolishes U.S. income tax. C. Abolishes the IRS. Employees of the IRS will be transferred to the U.S. Treasury National Sales Tax Area. D. Creates a 14% flat rate, non-essential, new items only sales tax revenue for the government. In other words, food and medicine will not be taxed, nor will used items such as old homes. E. Increases benefits to senior citizens. F. Returns constitutional law to all courts and legal matters. G. Reinstates the original title of nobility amendment. H. Establishes new presidential and congressional elections within 120 days after NESARA's announcement. The interim government will cancel all national emergencies and return us back to constitutional law. I. Monitors elections and prevents illegal election activities of special interest groups. J. Creates a new U.S. Treasury rainbow currency backed by gold, silver, and platinum precious metals, ending the bankruptcy of the United States initiated by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. K. Forbids the sale of American birth certificate records as chattel property bonds by the U.S. Department of Transportation. L. Initiates a new U.S. Treasury bank system in alignment with constitutional law. M. Eliminates the Federal Reserve System. During the transition period, the Federal Reserve will be allowed to operate side by side of the new U.S. Treasury for 1 year in order to remove all Federal Reserve notes from the money supply. N. Restores financial privacy. O. Retrains all judges and attorneys in constitutional law. P. Ceases all aggressive U.S. government military actions worldwide. Q. Establishes peace throughout the world. R. Releases enormous sums of money for humanitarian purposes. S. enables the release of over 6,000 patents of suppressed technologies that are being withheld from the public under the guise of national security, including free energy devices, anti-gravity, and sonic healing machines. 25. Late one evening on March 9, 2000, a written quorum call was hand-delivered by Delta Force and Navy SEALs to 15 members of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House who were sponsors and co-sponsors of NISRA. They were immediately escorted by the Delta Force and Navy SEALs to their respective voting chambers where they passed the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. 26. These 15 members of Congress were the only people lawfully allowed to hold office in accordance with the original 13th Amendment. Remember, British soldiers destroyed copies of the Titles of Nobility Amendment, TONA, in the War of 1812 because it prevented anyone who had ties to the Crown of England from holding public office. 27. President Clinton had no interest in signing NISRA into law. On October 10, 2000, and under orders from U.S. military generals, the elite Naval SEALs and Delta Force stormed the White House. Under gunpoint, they forced Bill Clinton to sign NISRA. During this time, Secret Service and White House security personnel were ordered to stand down, were disarmed, and were allowed to witness this event under a gag order. President Clinton also relinquished his bar registry. 28. From its very inception, Bush Sr., Clinton, the corporate government, major bank houses, and the Carlyle Group have opposed NISRA. To maintain secrecy, the case details and the docket number were sealed and revised within the official congressional registry to reflect a commemorative coin. It was again revised even more recently. This is why there are no public congressional records about NISRA and why a search for this law will not yield the correct details until after the reformations are made public. 29. Members of Congress will not reveal NISRA because they have been ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court justices to deny its existence, or face charges of treason punishable by death. Some members of Congress have actually been charged with obstruction. When Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone was about to break the gag order, his small passenger plane crashed, killing his wife, daughter, and himself. If fear isn't enough to keep Washington in line, money is. Routine bribes are offered to governmental/military officials by the power elite/secret government. 30. Not surprisingly, much disinformation about NISRA can be found on the internet. Wikipedia's article is total disinformation. Dr. Harvey Francis Barnard's NISRA bill was rejected by Congress in the 1990s. Dr. Barnard was a systems philosopher and had tried for years to interest Congress in his monetary reform suggestions. 31. The next step was to announce NISRA to the world, but it was not an easy task. Many powerful groups have tried to prevent the implementation of NISRA. The NISRA law requires that at least once a year, an effort be made to announce the law to the public. 3 current U.S. Supreme Court judges control the committee in charge of NISRA's announcement. These judges have used their overall authority to secretly sabotage NISRA's announcement. 32. In 2001, after much negotiation, the Supreme Court justices ordered the 107th Congress to pass resolutions approving NISRA. This took place on September 9, 2001, 18 months after NISRA became law. 33. The next day, on September 10, 2001, George Bush Sr. moved into the White House to steer his son on how to block the announcement. The next day, on September 11, 2001, at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Alan Greenspan was scheduled to announce the new U.S. Treasury bank system, debt forgiveness for all U.S. citizens, and abolishment of the IRS as the first part of the public announcements of NISRA. 34. It is alleged that just before the announcement at 9 a.m., Bush Sr. ordered the demolition of the World Trade Center's Twin Towers to stop the international banking computers on floors 1 and 2 in the North Tower from initiating the new U.S. Treasury bank system. Explosives in the World Trade Center were said to be planted by operatives and detonated remotely in Building 7, which was demolished later that day, it is alleged, in order to cover up their crime. It also was said that remote pilot technology was used in a flyover event to deliver a payload of explosives into the Pentagon at the exact location of the White Knights in their new Naval Command Center, who were coordinating activities supporting NISRA's implementation nationwide. With the announcement of NISRA stopped dead in its tracks, George Bush Sr. was said to have decapitated any hopes of returning the government back to the people. See this documentary to be released after the GCR. 35. By 2008, another proponent of the New World Order, the Obama administration, was in charge. The Golden Age of Gaia does not believe the allegation that President Obama is a proponent of the New World Order. Obama refused to work under a budget while ballooning the national debt with a stimulus package that didn't stimulate the economy, but more than tripled the national debt. 36. The U.S. fast began losing their influence as the main world reserve currency due to its uncontrollable monetary policies, ever-growing debt, and use of fiat currency. 37. Also in 2008, the Royal Dragon families became very concerned when the U.S. could not even pay the interest on its debt. They called in their loan on Lehman Brothers, thus causing the 2008 mortgage crisis. 38. By now, nations of the global monetary system had alarming concern about the U.S. national debt and U.S. currency, which had no backing, yet was being used as the main world reserve currency. 39. The Royal Dragon families then stepped in to form BRICS, backing the currencies of nations who joined the BRICS system with their own natural resources and gold reserves of the Dragon families. 40. Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, China, and South Africa formed BRICS to correct the situation, and backed the world's individual currencies with gold and natural resources to conform to Basel III of the IMF. They revalued all of the world currencies and worked toward a global currency reset, using revaluation of the Iraqi dinar as a kingpin for the other world currencies to revalue. 41. By 2015, all the nations of the world except for the US and Japan had joined BRICS. Japan joined in the fall of 2015, leaving the US as the lone holdout. 42. Around the same time that BRICS was formed, 7 to 8 years ago, the United States Army created an interim government called the New Republic and stationed it in West Virginia. The Royal Dragon families had demanded formation of this new republic as a necessary step before they would back U.S. currency with their gold in the BRICS system. 43. A new republic interim government was formed by concerned Congresspeople because the Obama administration refused to join BRICS, thus creating a dangerous situation of fiat currency where the U.S. economy could easily collapse. 44. The new republic went into operation near the start of 2015. 45. The new republic had to construct a national currency, but they didn't have the gold by which they could comply with the IMF's Basel III. In April 2015, the Chinese elders leased 100 billion in gold to the new republic. 46. U.S. Treasury Reserve Notes (TRNS) were created by the new republic for use at the government level, but they're not yet used on the street. Since 2015 they have been trading the new TRNS internationally, in Europe and in the Japanese market. 47. For a monetary system that could be used by the general U.S. public, the new republic created what's known as United States Notes (USNs). 48. The only difference between the new U.S. notes currency and the Federal Reserve notes is that the new currency will not be charged interest. 49. The new U.S. note currency is like what President Kennedy had created way back in 1963 when he tried to shut down the Federal Reserve right before he was killed. 50. Kennedy's cost of trying to take down the Federal Reserve using new U.S. notes is explained in this documentary to be released July 4, 2016 as an introduction of the new republic. 51. In 2012, as the settler on an Econo Trust lien against the Federal Reserve Bank and to prevent them from rechartering, the Federal Reserve was melded into the new United States Treasury now located in Reno, Nevada. 52. Patriots like Winston Stroud helped the Federal Reserve to be absorbed into the U.S. Treasury. 53. There was a 2011 treaty white paper that informed finance ministers of the economical conditions of the world. As a result, Ireland challenged the banks. They said, "If you can prove that you loaned us any money, we will gladly pay you. But if you can't, basically go pound sand." And they held to it. They had that same thing going on with Greece. It was believed that if the right one had gotten elected in Greece, they would have done the same thing as did Ireland. 54. In 2015, the new republic, charged with protecting the royal dragon family gold that backed the new U.S. currency, located the new U.S. Treasury in Nevada on an Indian reservation because Indian reservations have free trade zones. 55. In 2015, Marine Corps General Dunford was selected to be the interim president of the new republic because he had recently been appointed by Congress to be the Joint Chief of Staff at the Pentagon. 56. Also in 2015, when Paul Ryan replaced John Boehner as Senate Majority Leader and Speaker of the House, he did so knowing he would eventually replace Dunford as the interim president of the new republic. 57. On January 1, 2016, Paul Ryan replaced Dunford as interim president of the new republic. He will remain in place as the interim U.S. president until the November 2016 elections. 58. Dunford stepped down to fill the slot as vice president of the new republic. 59. On March 31, 2016, the U.S. finally joined BRICS, opening the door for the new republic to take over and dictate U.S. monetary policy under rules as outlined in the original U.S. Constitution. 60. The new Republic of United States government and Treasury were restored at 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, March 30, 2016, when the Dragon family released funding for the new republic, the real reason for the Chinese visit to the White House that day. 61. The Dragon family $100 billion in gold that was leased to the new U.S. Treasury and temporarily stored in Texas, was shipped to the new U.S. Treasury in Reno. 62. As of March 29, 2016, the USA Inc. government cabal membership was being legally arrested. This was expected to continue until all known dark agents were rounded up. 63. Also as of March 30, 2016, Redemption 800 numbers were released to the new Republic leadership for final implementation at some unknown time. These 800 numbers could be released anytime per internal discretion. 64. The GCR is about to take place, along with the release of 800 numbers. The new Republic will be announced sometime after the GCR has taken place, suspected to be around July 4, 2016. 65. Under the new Republic, the Federal Reserve is closed. 66. Under the new Republic, the IRS and corrupt judges will be dealt with. 67. Under the new Republic, the Bar Association and all U.S. attorneys will have to renounce their bar oath to the Temple Bar of London and become lawyers, but they can't be considered attorneys anymore. 68. The individual governments of the 50 states will remain in place. 69. The North American Union is now done. Washington, D.C. has been disincorporated. 70. Pope Francis has fired 5 of the cardinals out of the Vatican Bank, which controlled the world currency before instigation of BRICS. 71. The New Republic military is in the process of reclaiming all military installations. 72. The purpose of the new U.S. Republic is to function as a restored constitutional government as established pre-Civil War. 73. Announcement of the new Republic is pending, but some say it will be done on July 4, 2016, along with forgiveness of bank and individual debt, plus release of this documentary.